Welcome to Forensic Friday.
Where we examine the intersection of true crime, psychology, and the heart of being human in the middle of it all. Hi, forensic friends.
Hello. I have my psycho cat sitting here. We'll see how long she's nice.
Yeah, she was eyeballing you like she wanted to fight a couple minutes ago. She does that.
She's looking at like my bling here.
Oh, that's what it is. She wants to get after your blingy sweatshirt.
Yeah, what's my pajama shirt?
Oh my gosh.
But she was looking at it and I was like, don't you jump on me.
So speaking of bling, we had our company Christmas party, and I get this text from Natalie, and she goes, I don't think that I can do sequins
Well,
because I look like a hooker.
it was the dress. So
It was
I
the
had
dress.
in mind that I was gonna wear this dress, and I hadn't worn it probably since 20. Shoot, I don't even know.
You've
Like
had it a long time.
2018. Yeah, and it's fit me forever,
Oh yeah.
but I didn't take into consideration that I have a bump now
Yeah.
and things are much shorter,
Yeah. Yes. And then
you
you wear
know?
the tall boots with it, and it was giving Pretty Woman. Pregnant Pretty Woman.
It was rough. And I put it on and I was like, I don't think it would be appropriate for me to show up to my
Mm-mm.
work Christmas party in this.
No, Nat and I are each other's wardrobe consultants. And so there are moments where it's like, is this appropriate for work? Should I be wearing this? Do we like this?
Mm-hmm.
It's just funny. Or before we present, then
Mm-hmm.
we really have to kind of touch base.
Oh yeah, well, we had those shirts embroidered and they're cute shirts.
They're cute.
But I put it on under my blazer and I'm like, wait, I look like I just put a blazer on over my pajama shirt.
It looked almost like a nightgown on you. It was very long.
Very well, yeah, I had to try to tuck it in, but just like fab, it was the whole. I was
It
like,
was, no, no,
we
you
can't
weren't
wear
wrong.
this.
We looked good. Just wearing all black. We looked very professional. It was great.
Yeah, that'll be my go-to.
Yeah, I want to have muscles like you this summer when we present.
Okay.
You
I'll
had
help.
you had some rock hard muscles going on when we presented.
I know they're not there now.
Maybe Baby Gray will be up there with us this year when we present up in
I,
Breckenridge.
yeah, she'll be up there.
Oh,
I'm sure.
I love that idea.
I know. She'll be joining.
Well, I know we have a ton to cover, so let's get into it.
Yeah, this case is, you know me. You all know me by now. This case, it takes me a minute to get my
Yes,
cases together because I can't just usually go through the case. I have to go through a lot of other things.
yes.
And it just takes a minute for my brain to fully understand the bigger picture.
Yeah, if they ever get a couple of my cases, they should know you're working on something big.
Yeah.
If they get like three of mine in a row, Natalie's taken down something epic and national and
When it's
historic.
when it's probably because I just want to know everything, like I just want to know every piece of the pie and people's backgrounds and you know, because I think most of the time I think the cool thing that we add to crime podcasts is that we do the psychology part about it because we are forensic therapists.
Yeah, we're not just therapists. I think just therapists are great. We do a lot of regular therapy work, but it is different when you have worked with folks who've gotten in trouble for various reasons because it gives you a little bit of a glimpse into their mind and how they think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you, Nat, but when I watch the news and something's gone down, I'm immediately thinking, okay, I bet it was this. It might have been, I
Mm-hmm.
see signs of this, and background is part of
Mm-hmm.
that.
Well, yeah, and it's funny. Preston's always like, something will like come up on like a news feed or whatever, and it'll say like, wife murdered, looking for the suspect, or this woman of, 3 kids and a husband, and I'm
Yeah.
automatically like, oh, it was the husband.
Yeah. Almost
And
every
then it
time.
is. And then it is the husband. I mean, I know that's not rocket science now,
Yep.
but you know.
Well, and what we're going to talk about today is what happens when we take that too far.
Yes. So, this case, y'all, I have been obsessed with this case since I was a kid
Same.
because it happened in our very close to hometown, Boulder, Colorado. I
Yeah.
just say that, and all of you are probably like, oh, they're about to talk about Jon Benet Ramsey.
Jon Benet.
And you are correct. We are. I didn't finish my thought, Jay, around why I think we are different than other crime podcasts.
Hmm.
And I think the main thing that sets us apart is, and I've gotten feedback on this, like from friends and family, they love the psychology part that we bring,
Yeah.
but they also love when we do more of the history, if we can find it, behind some of the suspects and victims of the cases. We don't just talk about the crime, but that's usually why it takes me so long to put my cases together because I
Hmm.
just need to know all the things.
Well, and the media doesn't always, actually doesn't always, rarely,
Hmm.
rarely do they give us any background of
Right.
parents of the people involved. And in court, that's not really relevant except in evaluations. So,
Right, exactly.
yeah.
Well, and we think of like Army Hammer, and that was a
Yes.
whole twisty thing, y'all. If you haven't listened to our Army Hammer case, I think is there what two or three of them? I can't even remember.
Two. There's two. Two
Two
beefy
of
ones,
them,
but they're
two
great.
beefy ones, and we do a deep dive. But it's cases like that that help us understand, or history, family history like that that help us understand the case.
Yes.
And so with this case, because it's still not solved. It still like drives everybody crazy. I had to do a deep dive on the family because, you know, I just needed to know if the family was super messed up because if they're messed up, then, it feels like there would be more of a reason to look at them as suspects.
Yes.
Does that make
Absolutely.
sense? So I'm curious, Janine, for you, when you think of the John Benet Ramsey case, what do you think of?
I think it's really interesting. When I lived in the sorority in Boulder, we were on 15th and we were a couple of blocks from the house. So I've been by the house.
Mhm.
It's a big, beautiful house in Boulder. When I was growing up and I heard about it, I think it's always just made me feel really sad.
Mhm.
Just beautiful little girl. I look at it a little different now that I have a kid too, where I'm
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh, this family was just it's Christmas time. Kids are so excited. You're spending
Mhm.
time as a family, and then bam,
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Yeah.
regardless of who did this to her, just the idea that a little child was hurt this way has always been really, really upsetting.
Yes. And it's like, yeah, I will say this is like the part of my brain that's like, if you're still alive, whoever did it, you would probably be the most famous human
Hmm.
ever. If
Why
you
don't you come
admitted,
forward?
if you admitted. So if you want clout, if you want some fame,
Go ahead
if
and
you,
come on out here.
yeah, let us know who you are.
I would love that.
We all would.
I know.
So John Bonet, she was born on August 6th, 1990. So my birthday's August 88.
Mm.
So she's like 2 years younger than me.
Oh,
I know, isn't that
she's
crazy?
6 years younger than me.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So she would be 34 right now, which is crazy to think about. And it's interesting in like the Netflix like 3 episode documentary thingy. John Ramsey's like now wife says this at the end, but I remember I hadn't gotten there yet when I was writing this part. And I always think like it's hard to imagine her as a 34-year-old because I will always think of her as a little kid.
Always.
So that's like the weird part. She doesn't age in my brain.
Mm-mm. And the Christmas part always hit me too. Just the idea that it's the well-to-dos in Boulder at Christmas time and it's
Hmm.
so lovely and
Hmm.
it's still Boulder's got that small town feel even though there's a lot of people that live there. So,
Yeah.
just sad.
Yeah. It's super sad. So one of the things that I actually didn't really know but she was
Mhm.
actually born in Georgia.
Oh, interesting.
Hmm. So she was born, her and her brother were both born in Georgia, and then they moved to Colorado when obviously she was super young.
Why did they move?
Yeah, I'll get into that. So she had an older brother, I
Hmm.
guess, named Burke, and he was born in 87. Also kind of strange because I still also think of him as the 9-year-old boy and he's still alive and he's very much like 37.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Mm,
They then moved to Boulder when she was still really young, like I said, and she started kindergarten in Boulder.
okay.
Yep. Then after she died, she was buried back in Georgia, where where John Ramsey, her father's other daughter, was also buried.
Because she was in a car accident, right? Daughter with a
Yep.
previous relationship.
Yep, with his previous wife. Yeah. He has
Yeah.
3 other kids with his previous wife.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she died. The older daughter had died at the age of 22.
Mm.
You know.
This family has gone through it.
I know. Can you imagine?
Mm-mm.
I can't even imagine losing 2
Mm-mm.
kids.
No.
So, a little family history. So, I love to do family history, like I was saying, because it just helps me understand the picture more. And
Yeah.
it can, like you said, Janine, it can help understand as to like why people might be suspects in their own family members' cases.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, we know
Right.
about intergenerational violence. We know about all that stuff.
Yep. So, a little bit about John. He came from a family of hard workers. His father was a World War II pilot. He got his uh, bachelor's in electrical engineering and an MBA at Michigan State University. Not University of Michigan, but the Spartans, I
He
think.
was, he is a Spartan. He was
Yeah,
a Spartan.
which I know you're not a Spartan, but
No, I am definitely not a Spartan, but I mean, that's quite the education.
yeah. Then joined the Navy in 1966 and served as a Civil Engineer Corps officer in the Philippines for 3 years. He then became a businessman who was the president of Access Graphic, a computer software company that later became. So he later became a subsidiary. Y'all, I just learned what that meant. Um,
Subsidiary.
subsidiary
I love you.
to Lockheed Martin. You know what word took me forever to say correctly?
What?
Cinnamon.
Cinnamon.
It took me
Okay.
forever to say it correctly. I used to say cinnamon.
We drive Garrett nuts because we have to check out our pronunciations before calls every time.
I know. But it became basically a part of Lockheed Martin, which is pretty cool. I didn't know that.
That is very cool.
I know. My big brother works for Lockheed Martin.
Well, and my understanding is he timed that business just right. Like they made great
Literally.
money and,
Literally.
I think they hit
Yes.
the dot com,
Hmm.
in the 90s or when that was kind of all
Yep.
going at a fever pitch. It sounds like he timed that just right.
Yeah, he did. So John was married before Patsy to a woman named Luce. Oh, I'm gonna screw this up. Lucina Pash. Pash. Lucina Pash.
Lucina Pash. Just
And
throw
had,
that out there.
oh yeah, Lucina Pash, and had 3 children with her. That marriage ended in 1978. His eldest daughter from that marriage, and we already mentioned this,
Hmm.
died in 1992 at the age of 22 in a really bad car accident.
Okay.
He then married his second wife, Patsy, in 1980, with whom he had their 2 children, Burke and Jon Benet. When they met, I don't know if you know this, when they met, she was 23 and he was 35.
I did not know that. I knew
Yeah.
there was an age difference. I don't think I knew it was quite that much.
Yeah. Well, and he says in an interview that, they met and he thought she was real nice, but he was like, yeah, no, like she's too young, blah, blah, blah. But then she didn't, according to him, didn't act like the other 23-year-olds at the time.
Hmm. Like she was kind of mature for her age or something.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I literally wrote, he thought she was nice, but initially thought she was too young. Then he got to know her and they hit it off and felt like she was, yeah, more like an old soul.
Like an old soul. I could see
Yeah.
that.
In 1991, John had moved away with Patsy to Boulder with their young children. After they moved, that was when John's daughter Beth died. So that was his older daughter. So they had
Okay.
already moved to Boulder when she passed away.
I didn't know that either.
I know. And John Benet was only 1.5 when her older sister died.
Okay.
Yeah. So when John Benet was about 1.5, Patsy was also diagnosed with ovarian cancer.
Oh, I didn't realize she got diagnosed so young.
Yeah.
I knew
I
about
did.
when it came back, but I didn't know she got diagnosed that young.
Yes.
Wow.
I didn't know that either.
Mm-mm. And ovarian cancer, that's one of the big baddies,
Yeah. Yeah,
you know?
it's hard to get rid of. So that first round when she first got diagnosed, she did chemo for about a year and then became cancer free.
Well, that's exciting.
I know. So Patsy was from West Virginia, where she spent all of her youth and her college years there. So she was like born and raised and stayed for a while
Mm-hmm.
in West Virginia. She went to Western Virginia University, was in a sorority, and graduated with a BA in journalism.
Wow.
Yep. She was pretty into the beauty pageant stuff as well. In 1977, she won Miss West Virginia Beauty title, and her sister won in 1980.
Okay.
Yeah. So they were, they really liked that kind of stuff. Pretty like, low key. So knowing like that's about as far deep as I did with the family history stuff.
Mm-hmm.
No criminal history, nothing
Mm-mm.
crazy. Both came from great families. Anything sticking out to you?
Not really. I mean, you're not hearing, not that there is always a noted history of abuse or anything, but nothing super out of the ordinary.
Mm-mm. Right.
And in the pageant thing, I know you're going to get into this,
Mm-hmm.
is a lot. I think pageants are a lot. That's my own personal thing. However, that can be a generational thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
definitely a Southern thing. So I think we have to put that in the context of
Mm-hmm.
Georgia versus the context of Boulder. So
Yes.
in Georgia, that would have been less weird. I think it probably stood out a little bit more in Boulder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. Obviously, this is jumping ahead, but we do know that Patsy did die in 2006 from ovarian cancer, and she was 49. Something that I did not know is that after Patsy died, John met and began dating Beth Holloway. Do you recognize who
Natalie Holloway's mom?
Yes!
Oh, shut up.
I was gonna
No.
wait for a second and see.
It took me a minute. Natalie Holloway's mom?
Yes.
Oh, that's weird. And also makes sense in a weird way. Like they had a lot to talk about, probably, about losing a daughter in a terrible way.
Your face was hilarious when
Well, because I'm like, Holloway. I'm trying to think about like, is that a singer? Is that what is that? Oh my gosh, it's Natalie Holloway's mom. I can't believe
Yes.
I got that right too, because me and names are sometimes not great. Were they together a long time?
No. He
Okay.
downplays their relationship. He states that they were just really close friends. And that makes sense. Like either way, it
Yes.
makes sense because they both lost their daughters.
Yes.
He then relocated to Moab, Utah, and that's where he met his third wife, which we'll get into.
Okay.
Uh, very briefly. I don't have that much on their relationship actually, but he met his wife who he's with now in 2011. So anyway,
Isn't he like he's 81 now, right?
yeah, he's older. I don't know how old he is.
I think he's 81 because I was talking to my dad earlier today and he goes, he is 81 years old. And I was like, oh my gosh.
And he's still real bright.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they interview him in this documentary.
Well, and he's very active. He was always active, always
Hmm.
like learning and hands-on
Hmm.
and all the things. So
Hmm.
that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. I do believe that he now lives in Michigan with his wife.
Mm,
Okay. So, Miss John Benet, we all know, as you said earlier, that she died between December 25th and December 26th.
hmm
So they woke up Christmas morning, had a normal, lovely, regular Christmas, opened presents as One's family does. Had a great day and then went to dinner
Mm.
at some friend's house,
Yeah.
right? They got home around 9:30 p.m. and said that Jon Benet was sleeping already, like she had fallen asleep in the car probably.
Oh, that is what they do.
And yeah, she's like freaking 6 or however old she
She
was.
was probably up at 5 o'clock in the morning. That's what kids do, man. They wake you up. We had to set a time limit. Like when I was growing up, we would talk to my
Mm-hmm.
parents about, hey, we're gonna try to not get up before, 6:30 or whatever the time was.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother and I, man, if we weren't up at 5 o'clock in the morning trying to sneak down the stairs and peek and all the things,
Oh yeah, you had to. I remember Mason would come down after because Mason and I shared a room until we were like 10.
Yeah.
Um, and so once we split rooms, he would come downstairs, but he would have to walk by the living room because his room
Yep.
was upstairs and mine was down. He'd have to walk by the living room, come down to get me, and
Yep.
he would wake me up almost every time, every year with Nerf guns.
Like any good brother.
I was like, can't you be nice? Like, just come in and say, hey,
Merry
sis.
Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Let's
No.
wake up. Let's go get mom and dad up. No, he's like bringing the Nerf guns down.
Well, Eric and I knew we couldn't go all the way downstairs. So we go like halfway down the stairs and just try to peek. And then we'd tell each other what we could see.
Yeah, Mason said that he would do this while he walked by the tree.
That's adorable.
I know I don't believe him, but it's
I
fine.
don't either. I don't believe that either.
He's gonna be like, stop talking about me on your podcast.
Get your own
Never.
podcast.
Yeah, never. Never.
Never.
Oh my gosh. Really quick side note. There's a funny story about my brother and I where I sold him Oreos out of the pantry for like a week.
I love this story.
And it got brought up this weekend, which is why I'm thinking about it.
That's so funny.
I know.
Sisters, we clap back in our own ways,
Well, here's the thing. I saw an opportunity to make money
Entrepreneur.
and I did it. I never kept those Oreos for ransom either. They just stayed in the pantry the whole time. He would have to walk down the stairs, give me however many Oreos he wanted. It was $1 per Oreo.
That's
He'd give me
incredible.
as many Oreos as he wanted to give me dollars. And then he would walk his happy butt back upstairs and get Oreos.
That's quite the profit margin, Nat, really, when you think about it, because
No, I know.
you didn't buy the Oreos. You weren't
Absolutely
paying to
not.
store the Oreos.
Mm-mm.
You were
I
just
was just
charging
making the
him.
money.
That's amazing.
I know. I know. Here we
You're
are.
just a businesswoman. You know?
I'd like to think that. So, Jon Benet was sleeping. They put her straight to bed. Okay, that's like their story. The next morning, there was a long, super long ransom note that some strangers had Jon Benet, and it was Patsy who found the note on the stairs.
Hmm.
The ransom note started with, and I'm going to quote it.
Okay.
Listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. It's so weird. At this
So
time,
insane.
at this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, which is the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah.
And if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to our letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. Any deviation of my instructions will result in immediate execution of your daughter. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. That's extreme.
Good Lord.
I know. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is anyway marked or tampered with, she dies. Don't try to grow a brain, John. You are not the only fat cat around.
I thought that they respected his business,
Yeah.
but now he's got to grow a brain.
You grow a brain. You're not the only fat cat around.
This is why you and I don't do well with criminals sometimes, or maybe we do very well with criminals, depending on which side of the table you're on.
Yeah,
You can't, he's already contradicted himself in the note.
I know. So don't think that killing would be difficult. It is up to you, John. Victory. And then it says SBTC, like signed SBTC.
I
Your
know my face. I know. This is the part of the case that gives me fits. This right
okay.
here. I just don't
Like
understand it.
what? What's your fit?
It makes no effing sense with any of the things. It doesn't make sense from a it doesn't matter who did it.
Mm-hmm.
Who killed John Benet? It doesn't matter who it was.
Mm-hmm.
This freaking note
Yeah,
so frustrating because it's
I know.
hard to understand and it doesn't fit the profile. That's what I'll say. We'll get into profiles later, but this doesn't fit the profile.
No, not at all.
Mm-mm.
They then called the police like right away. Which you, right before we signed on, you were kind of talking about your thoughts on that, like that they did end up calling the police right away after they were told not to. Do you want to share like what your thoughts were?
Well, here's my thing. It is always, well, you know what? In his case, I don't know that calling the Boulder police was the brightest thing he could have done, to be frank.
Well,
Most
shoot.
parents,
He
most
didn't know how it was gonna go.
he did not, no. But most parents, if somebody said if you call anyone,
Hmm.
your child's going to be beheaded, and I knew that they had been in my home, which I know you're going to get into,
Hmm.
I would hesitate a second. Even me, with everything I know, it's always best to inform law enforcement. What am I going to do without law enforcement? I can't go all vigilante. Um,
Right.
but that was probably a difficult call to make and may have also influenced some of the skepticism around him later on.
Yeah, potentially.
Hmm.
Yeah, at one point the family was interviewed and they said that they called their close friends whose house they were at the night before and they told them that their daughter was missing. They also called a few other close friends to come over for support. So here's the other piece of this.
Hmm.
Um, so they did call the police, which I totally understand where you're coming from, but you and I, like you said, both know that we like you have to call law enforcement right
A
away.
smart person's going to call the cops.
Yes. So I think, and there's part of me, John is a smart human. So there's part of me that's like, he knew, he probably just knew, like,
Yeah.
what am I gonna do?
Well, yeah. Yes.
You know? So then they call their friends over. So this is like kind of where things start to go south
Hmm. Hmm.
with investigation and all that. So now we have like basically a breakfast party at the Ramsey's house. I'm being facetious. It wasn't a party, but we have now like many humans in
Yeah.
this house while they don't know where John Benet is.
And it does sort of, I guess it's a little weird to have your friends over, but also it does support the fact that they thought she was maybe with somebody else. Like they're thinking this is now the command center. We're going to figure out who has her.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's hard though, because I think like I put myself in their shoes. If
Hmm.
God forbid something happened to my kiddo or your kiddo, like the first people I'm going to call is my family.
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't have family in Boulder.
Right.
So they call the closest people to them. But the first thing I'm going to do is call my family. And sure as shit, my parents are going to be the first ones who show up at my house.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Same with my
absolutely.
brother. So it's like, I see like a lot of people were like, well, why'd they call their friends? Y'all, they didn't have family in
Well, their
Colorado.
friends were their family in Colorado.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, something goes wrong with anything that happens in my family, my husband or my kid, right? Like my parent, I'm the first people I'm going to call is my family.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And they are going to be coming over,
Yes. Yes.
So I know a lot of people were saying, well, that's weird that they did that. It's not that weird.
I don't think that's that weird.
No.
What's weird? You'll get into it.
Okay.
Because what's weird is the fact that when the police responded, they didn't lock down the scene. That's the part that's weird, which I
Yeah.
know you're going to get into.
Yes, we're going
But
to
if
get
you
into
roll up to
that.
party at the Ramseys, everybody's having breakfast, everybody and their brothers there, and you're reading the ransom note, to an audience. Like at some point, somebody needed to lock down the house.
literally, and say,
Hmm.
"Hey, go somewhere, go to one of y'all's houses."
Yes.
So the police, well, and this is, yeah, here's the thing. The police closed John Benet's bedroom door and said no one goes in there as they did not want anything to be tampered with, which obviously makes sense, but that's the
Mhm.
only place they cut off.
Well, and the other thing that's weird, and you may have already said this, but I don't think you did. They they did a cursory search of the house, or no, they read the letter and called the police, but they hadn't gone looking yet.
No,
Right.
they have
Okay.
not looked around the house. And yeah, you and I will talk about that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so they closed off John Benet's room, and then an officer collected the ransom note. They asked for examples of the family's handwriting, so both the parents, and the police had a detective there that was also a handwriting detective.
Wow.
They had a notebook that had each of their handwritings. It's Patsy's notebook, so that's the other interesting part, that
Mm.
had her handwriting, and it had an entire sheet of paper in the notebook still attached with what seemed to be the initial ransom note. Does that make
So
sense?
whoever wrote this, that knucklehead, started writing it, started over
Yes.
on two different pieces of paper.
And they kept the one that they started, the first version, and it said was Mr. and Mrs. and then it had like a line, like it was about to be an R,
Uh-huh.
right? A capital R. So it just had that first line. And then they started it over, but they left that initial one in the notebook.
Did both of the letters start the same way? Mr. and Mrs. Like, why did they stop, I wonder?
That's a great question. I feel
Mhm.
like I have that.
Look at me, I'm practically in law enforcement.
I know. No, they were different.
Interesting. What was the difference?
So the first one said Mr. and Mr. and Miss, and then it started to look like an R.
Mm-hmm.
This actual ransom letter said Mr. Ramsey.
Oh, well, that is significantly different. Why did they drop
Yeah,
Patsy?
I don't know.
Ooh.
I
See, I
know.
feel like I'm asking questions right now that I don't feel confident Boulder Police even got that far.
No,
That's fascinating.
I know. But it also might be part of why Patsy was such a big suspect, which we'll get into.
Hmm. That just doesn't feel like a reason to start over.
Mm-mm.
Like, what was I? Oh, wait a minute, we're not including Patsy. Start over. Like, it just doesn't.
Mhm.
What was the thought process?
Yeah, I have no idea. And it's based on what it seemed like I said, the ransom note was written from a notebook that was in the household. So like it belonged to the Ramseys. So
And it
someone,
makes sense that it was hers because I don't know about you, Nat, but my mom always had like a legal pad, notebook, something downstairs in the kitchen area. Like always.
yeah, that was my dad, but yeah.
Well, because back in the day, phone calls, they didn't have cell phones. So it was like,
Yeah.
people called the landline and you'd have to write things down on a notebook.
Mm-hmm.
And usually the phone was in the kitchen or somewhere by the kitchen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, both my parents used notepads. My dad had the ones that like look similar to what was used in this one,
Hmm.
like the yellow, you just tear the sheet off.
Yeah, like it's a legal pad,
Yep.
basically. Yeah.
Yep. So that was when the family became suspects. So initially they weren't really suspects.
So
Also,
because they used a notebook that was there.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, and there's more to the handwriting thing, which we'll get into.
Oh, okay.
Also, the note was very lengthy, which is like super weird. Usually, ransom notes are a lot shorter than
Hmm.
that and way more to the point. It was also weird that the specific number was $118,000
Hmm.
because that's also very specific.
Very specific.
And it's relatively low
Well, yeah.
for a ransom,
Yeah.
you know?
And didn't you say that was exactly the amount of his bonus?
Hmm.
Weird.
Yep. So my thought with that is that because obviously bonuses are given around Christmas time, and I think, well, and the investigator said this too, that they believe there was paperwork on his desk that had that information, like just kind of right there.
So they were probably thinking he has this much cash.
Yeah. Like I can at least get this much from him.
Mm-hmm. Quickly.
So they waited for the call, and obviously there was no call
Mm-hmm.
from the kidnappers.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, and again, a lot of you guys know this because if you're anything like us, you've already watched all the things on the Ramsey case.
Oh yeah.
So I'm going to try to go through this somewhat quickly, but Mr. Ramsey, John Ramsey, was giving off quote unquote anxious energy, and he was instructed to go around the house and just like take a look around the house and see if he finds anything unusual. First of all, that's dumb.
Well, especially to go by yourself.
Well, he didn't go by himself. He went with a friend.
But I mean, like cops
Yes.
in a good investigation, you would have a cop accompanying and asking questions.
Yes.
We've had to call police at the center before. They don't like
They
send you
don't
to go
leave us
figure something out.
alone.
They won't leave
Yeah.
us alone until they know
No.
what's going on and all the things.
Yeah. So John and his friend went searching the house and they went to the basement. And everyone was like, it's so weird that he went straight to the basement. It's not that weird. I say it's not that weird because they've all been on the main floor. The
It
floor
came
itself,
from the upstairs.
it came from the upstairs. She's not in her room. She's not in Burke's room. She's not
Right,
in their room. She's
right.
not in the playroom. So she's not upstairs. She's not on the main level. So why would they not go to the basement first? Anyway, people are like, it's weird that he went to the basement. I'm like, it's not that weird.
Mm-mm. Totally.
They went into what they called the train room because they had a train set up in there. And he saw that the window in the basement had been opened and broken, and there was a suitcase under the window.
Mm,
And it seemed like it could have been like used as a step to get in and out of the window.
mm.
And John Ramsey said that suitcase should not have been there.
Well, and that's an unusual because you can get in, like you could jump through something, but to pull yourself up,
It's
it
hard.
made sense that to get out, they would have needed to stand on something.
Yep. Yep. So, what was interesting about the window being broken, so John actually broke the window the summer prior because he had locked himself out of the house
Oh,
and didn't have it fixed yet.
interesting.
Yeah, but it was also wide open. The window was also wide open, but the glass was broken.
Mm,
The next place they went was what they called the wine cellar. There was no wine in it, so it was just like an empty room.
mm,
It was like an old coal room, and her body was right there in the coal room. She
mm,
had tape over her mouth, and her hands were tied behind her back. John immediately pulled the tape off. Here's the thing. Here's why the police were really not smart in this situation.
mm-mm.
Like you said, they had him go by himself.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
And, people are like, well, why did he like go up to the body? Who's not going to go up to their own child's body?
Oh, are you kidding me? And he didn't know standing there that she was dead. He might have thought she was just laying
Laying
there.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he
Also,
goes,
if we know that there were kidnappers, one of the first things the cops should have done is clear the house. There could have still been somebody in the house.
yes.
Oh, good Lord.
No, they like royally messed this up.
Mm,
So he pulled the tape off her mouth, and tried to untie the knot that held her hands together. He screamed and carried her body up the stairs to get help. The detectives looked for a pulse, but she was gone at that point.
mm,
When they found their daughter, one of the investigators whispered to another and said, I knew it. I knew they killed their daughter.
mm.
So they were like kind of screwed from the beginning.
Yeah, because the police already had their opinions,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which again is not that different than you watching the news at night and hearing a woman disappears and going, oh, it's the husband.
Yeah.
It's not that different, but as law enforcement, you would hope
Yeah.
somebody could be a little more objective.
Yeah. Yep. So what they didn't necessarily see right away because it was like embedded in her neck
Mm,
was the cord that was used. So the cause of death was asphyxiation by strangulation and craniocerebral trauma. So hit a big blow to her head
Mm,
and obviously was ruled as a homicide. As you also know, there was evidence of sexual assault and trauma
mm-hmm,
and a male's, I'm going to make this really clear, a male's DNA in her underpants and under her fingernails.
mm,
It was also stated that she was sexually assaulted with a broken paintbrush.
mm-hmm.
That the same paintbrush, I believe, that was used to make I'm going to screw this up,
Karat.
garrote.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you guys who might not know what a garrote is, it's a tool that was made to strangle her with. But what's interesting about this is it's like I never really knew how like you would make one
Yeah.
until I watched this documentary.
Most people don't even know what it is. That's the other
No.
thing that's weird.
So it's basically a cord that is tied to something and you can like tighten it and loosen it based on like whatever.
Well, it's a tool of control and
Yes.
torture and
Yes.
strangulation, which
Yes.
is giving sex offender vibes, if anything.
100%.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Which we'll come back to, but it's often used in torture and in sexual offense.
Not necessarily use, it's not like, someone hung her. It's so the immediate use of it isn't necessarily to quote unquote strangle someone, but obviously it gets there. It is to control.
Yes.
Yeah, it's super messed up. Just the thought of it.
Mm-mm.
The thing with the paintbrush, so it was a broken paintbrush. It was Patsy's paintbrush,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was,
Wasn't it stored fairly close to where they found the body though? So it was like a
yeah.
convenience thing.
Oh, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was about to say, who would like, no one in their right mind would think about how to make a grout with a paintbrush. Anyway.
Mm-mm. You gotta be a certain kind of human to do that.
Yeah. 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 And it was very specific, right? Like the knot was tied very specifically by someone who would know how to make a tool like that.
Mm-hmm.
Some of John Benet's hair was also tangled in it,
Mm.
which uh that is consistent with someone holding her down and tying the knot. So like she was still
Mhm.
alive when that was happening.
Yeah, which means whoever, because one of the things that I thought, and we can get into theories later, but one of the things
Yeah.
that I thought was maybe the brother killed her on accident and the family tried to stage something. The bottom line is she was awake, she was alive and awake
She was alive,
when
yeah.
she was abused. And so that's a whole different can of worms when you're thinking about the
Mhm.
suspect.
Yes. Well, and that's the thing. I was having conversation with a friend of mine a few weeks ago, right after on Thanksgiving actually, and they were asking like, "What case are you guys going to do next?" And I said the John Benet, and she goes, "Oh, the family for sure did it." And I was like, "That's I don't agree."
Mm-mm. But
And
we didn't have this information. So the police didn't
right.
come forward. And unlike other cases, so when we talked about the
Yep.
Moscow murders, Iowa, Idaho, when we talked
Idaho.
about the Moscow murders in Idaho,
Mhm.
the police kept things under wraps because they were doing such a thorough investigation and didn't want to taint all
Mhm.
of it. I don't know that that was true of the Boulder PD for
It
reasons
wasn't.
we will get to. Um,
Yeah.
but this information was not put out there. And so, of
Mhm.
course, you're going to think with all these weird parameters that it's the
Mhm.
family. But
Mhm.
I don't know. I've never heard of in all of my forensic therapy experience a case where someone did something like this to their child. It's the only
No, never.
with the garrote, the sexual assault, all of it.
There's been no history of sexual abuse. Like
Mm-mm,
this child went to her pediatrician when she needed to. There was never any
mm-mm,
signs of anything.
no.
Yeah, so I totally agree with you. But that was the thing. That's what I told my friend. I was like, the way that she died is
Mm-mm,
insane.
mm-mm. Yep,
Insane. And I
yep.
don't know, you and I've thankful, we don't work with sex offenders. I could never.
I mean, in fairness, there's overlap between DV and sexual assaulting,
There
but
is.
not with children.
Exactly.
Yes.
I could never work with someone who it would be hard to work with a sex offender
Mm-hmm.
who offends on people at any age, but when it's kids involved, it's just a different
Mm-mm.
it triggers a different part of my brain.
Yes.
of like rage. But
Yes.
yeah, I was telling my friend, I was like, there's just no way a parent would do this. Like sometimes parents, like there are cases, obviously,
Hmm.
parents sexually assault their children, but it's not like this.
No.
I have never found a case where
Mm-mm.
this has happened to a kid from their parents.
No, there are parents who sexually assaulted their kids and murdered their kids and that kind of thing, but
Yeah.
in this manner with such a sexual component, I can't think of one that's
Yeah.
just like this.
Yeah. The cord was so tight around her neck it was like embedded in her neck.
Hmm.
There was red marks under her throat consistent with her trying to relieve the pressure, so it shows that she was alive. And the crazy thing is that she was also hit. Like I said, she had that brain damage, head trauma. So she was hit really hard in the head with something, whether it was a bat, they think it's either maybe a bat or a flashlight,
Hmm.
and it left an 8-inch crack in her skull, and
Mm,
her skull was caved in.
mm.
So, and they say like the both of the things happened so close to each other, they don't know which one happened really first.
This was a fast assault. That is the
Yeah,
sense that I get is this was a pretty
yeah,
fast assault.
yeah. But that's the thing. Like, it's like, was it though? Because to use a garrote and then to sexually assault her and then to hit her in the head, like, that's a lot of things to do.
I think that there was obviously an element of torture, but this was so high risk to break into a house
Yeah.
to do this. I think it was still a fairly short period of time, but I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. It had to have been.
Hmm.
It's just a lot happened, you
A
know?
lot happened. Yeah, in a short period of time.
Hmm. So one of the hardest things, and we're going to get into some of the suspects, and I'm not going to do a humongous deep dive into each suspect because we'd be here forever. But what's crazy is there were so many suspects, and even people, like numerous people, admitting to her murder.
Oh yeah. Was that true when it happened or just later?
As they found suspects, like kind of like what you said, I can't remember if you said this before we were recording or after we started, but I think as they like found evidence or like sex offenders in the area,
Mm-hmm.
that's when, and then they would investigate and then they would find more sketchy stuff around this case, then they would investigate them. And then some of them would admit to it, which I'll get into.
Yeah.
So like during, but also after, like no one like called and said, I did it, it was after they were investigated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and then law enforcement was not speaking with the media, but they were also enjoying their moment in the sun at the same time, which
Yes.
is
Oh my
weird.
gosh.
Idaho was not that way. So the cops went
Mhm.
silent, but it's not like they were out there holding press conferences and acting and being interviewed. But the detective and the responding officers, I mean, they weren't shying away from the media. They weren't giving
No,
details, but they weren't shying away from the media.
no. Well, and I forget that one officer's name, but he was a joke.
Oh yeah, no, he's a tragic mess, but the
Huh.
responding officer,
Oh, she was terrible.
she's kind of a nightmare. And I have a theory about her.
What's your theory?
Actually, I think that she was super triggered by something in her past. That's what I
Yeah.
think because she started feeling terrified of John Ramsey and kind of put a
Like,
story together that fit that. And
yes.
I wonder if she wasn't actually feeling really triggered. And so
Yeah.
here's this man who's super afraid. We know
Hmm.
that women are actually abused at a pretty high rate. I wonder if she got triggered in that moment and then
100%.
she started telling herself a story because she was talking about holding her gun close and that he
Counting
was
the
acting really
bullet.
strange. Yeah,
Yeah.
counting bullets. And that's a lot.
Yeah. No, it was a lot. And she looked like she was about to cry. And I'm like, girl, this is your own trauma showing up.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, this whole thing is frustrating. One of the things that I got even more mad about is when people started getting into the beauty pageant stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be honest, I might get crap for this, but whatever. Um, I have a I think I have a little bit of a different opinion on this stuff.
I already
Uh,
think I may give you crap for this, but go for it.
yeah, as I don't have I don't view it in the same way the media portrayed it. So
Well, the
like,
media made it very sexual.
yes. And I also don't view pageants that way. But I'm going
Hmm.
to get into some of my own thoughts on that. The media blew everything up. And again, in my opinion, like you just said, over sexualized her doing these pageants. At
Hmm.
one point, news anchor said that she looked like she was a hooker, which is insane to me.
Yeah, she did not look like a hooker.
She's literally in a, y'all, just makes me
Right?
so. And it was stated that she was forced to do these pageants, and she wasn't forced.
Mm.
At one point, some woman who was being interviewed, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, said that she was masturbating with the saxophone. That is literally the furthest thing from the truth.
I mean,
Like that woman is an idiot.
they showed the video, and I'm like, she's got problems because the kid's just dancing around, acting like she's playing a saxophone. That's what's
Literally.
happening.
I was like, I'm pretty sure people who play the saxophone in like jazz bands do those moves.
And listen, I can make anything weird, okay, because of my brain and
Yes,
our forensic experience and whatever.
sure.
I'm sorry, that just wasn't weird.
There was nothing weird about that.
Even if
That,
you were a sex offender in the audience, which we're going to get into how that can happen sometimes,
yes,
that was not a sexual scene. It just wasn't. If you
it
thought it
wasn't at all.
was, you're so weird. I'm sorry. Like,
I
you can put that on
literally,
TV. I'm with you on that.
I was watching this on the plane when I went to Michigan. Sorry if you can hear my dog. America, stop.
America.
He drives me crazy.
Oh, I know, I know.
But I was watching this on the plane to Michigan, and I literally think I said out loud, "You're an idiot" to that woman.
No, that was a stretch. I gotta say that was quite a
Yes.
stretch. Yes.
There was also suspicion that there was sexual abuse by her family, by her dad in particular. But their literal pediatrician was interviewed and denied ever seeing that. And pediatricians aren't going to lie about
Mm-mm.
that stuff. That's
Nope.
their job on the line.
Absolutely.
They also thought it was weird that John, her father, had pictures of Jon Benet on his desk in her pageant outfits. You guys, he didn't like these
Mm-mm.
aren't like homemade pictures. These are like the professional pictures that are done after
Yeah.
you perform at a recital.
And just like if your child was a swimmer or a dancer or anything else, you're
Mhm.
going to have pictures of your kid doing their activity. In this
Yes.
case, that was pageants.
Yes. Here's the thing. So I'm from the dance world. I
Yeah.
started dancing when I was like 3.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Every single girl, including myself, had way too much makeup on. That
Oh,
was
yeah.
back when like the blue eyeshadow was a big thing to
Oh,
be
I
on
loved
stage.
that. What was that? Angel Eyes, the Clinique one. Oh,
Oh, I don't know. I
oh,
just
it was
knew
white and blue.
I had
I know.
blue and blue eyeshadow,
Yes.
pink cheeks from blush and very red lipstick,
Oh, yeah.
you know? And so I look at the pageant stuff and I'm like, that she's literally in like a tutu, which is like what I wore.
Mhm.
The dance costumes that girls who are in recitals are, that they're in isn't far different from pageant outfits that she was in.
Here's what I will say. This is the thing that freaks me out. There's
Okay.
these thing called slippers. And I only know this from Toddlers and Tiaras, which I watched like one time and was like, oh. But basically, a slipper is almost like a denture that you put in that gives you full teeth. So when you have kiddos, their
Hmm.
teeth come in really hilarious ways. Like
Mhm.
they have the two bottom ones. That was my personal favorite with Mac. It was the cutest thing ever. But little kid teeth look like little kid teeth for a very long time.
Yeah, they're janky.
Even Mac's teeth that have come in and he's 9, they're his grown-up teeth, but they still don't look fully like grown-up teeth. So it's
Right.
just like a weird thing. So the slippers, you do have a 6-year-old child with
Hmm.
a full set of
Teeth.
basically, what's it called? Celebs do it. Veneers.
Veneers. Yeah.
It looks almost like a kid with a full set of teeth and veneers. And that to me is
Dang.
what makes them look older. So when they're
Yeah.
prancing around with their little outfits, their face now looks significantly older than a little kid. So that's the only pageant thing that really weirds me out is the
Yeah.
when they're wearing the slippers and it's not their real teeth. But like anything else, once one person is doing it and maybe they're winning more pageants than the other kids, pretty soon all the kids are doing it. So it's not like John Benet was the only one doing it,
Yeah.
but the
Interesting.
slippers are the weird thing.
I'm looking at her teeth now,
Hmm.
and they still look like kid teeth. They're still little. But
Yeah,
yeah,
but
they're like she's got a full set of teeth.
oh yeah, they're slippers,
Yeah, that's wild.
which is a weird thing. So if you're a pedophile, this is what I'm trying to say.
Hmm.
It helps close the gap maybe for a pedophile where they're looking at a child and you know what I mean? If you're trying to justify, if you're trying to imagine something, if a kiddo has a full set of teeth like that,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
easier to forget that it's a little child.
Yep. That's fair. Yeah, and that makes sense. I didn't know about the slippers, but
Weird.
here's the other thing though. Like it is weird and also like I don't know. Again, being in the dance world, it's like you're going to do whatever you're going to do to like look the best on the stage.
Well, and it has to read from the stage, which is a whole.
Yes.
I was in cheer, same thing. You want people to see your
Yeah.
face, so you have to overdo it a little bit with the blush
Yeah.
and everything.
I don't know. I think people blew that up. I think they blew up the whole pageantry stuff. It's a whole thing in my brain. I'm like, whatever. And here's the other thing is there are little girls who are like little girly girls and
Hmm.
those like more girly girls love this kind of stuff.
Oh
You know,
yeah,
and I think she just loved it.
totally.
The crappy thing is this was also right around when well sorry, not right around. So there was a story of Miss America. Her name was Marilyn Vanderbu
Okay.
Burr. Sorry, Marilyn Vanderburr.
Hmm.
And she was victimized by her father, sexually assaulted. And so they interviewed her when all this was going on.
Interesting.
And she basically was like, yes, John Benet's life is a mirror of mine. And our family looked like this great, well put together family, but we weren't. And she was sexually abused by her dad.
Did people know that before this, or did she
Yeah,
come out because of John Benet?
people knew.
Oh goodness. Okay.
So then there's that story, right? Where it's like, yes, that was true and horrible for her. Um, but then this, I think, impacted the Boulder police to keep running
Yes.
with the story that they had. So one of the things that I wrote down is obviously this whole like pageantry stuff makes me really mad because people are putting it on the parents, blaming the parents. And this isn't just with like the Ramseys. People
Mhm.
like give pageantry kids parents crap all the time. And you know what? I probably won't put my daughter in a pageant, but I'm not going to judge people who do.
I can tell you if there's some weird dude sitting there alone, I'm gonna be like, hey, I'm gonna be
Yes.
about it because
Yes.
predators,
Yes.
the book
And
Predators, read it.
that's what I was going to say. Obviously there's perverts and who sexualizes kids.
I'm be like, wait, who are you here with, sir?
Right.
Hmm.
And maybe instead of blaming the parents of like, well, you shouldn't let your kids do this stuff, maybe we should have better security of who we let in. Maybe there should be a list of people that are invited and anyone who's not on that list cannot go.
100%. Are you kidding me?
Like I just solved the problem, you guys. So there you go.
They
Whatever.
might do that now. I don't know.
I hope they do.
But it's like if you have a guy standing around a playground and he's just staring at the kids, eventually one of those moms is going to go up to him and go, hey, bro, who are you here with?
Right.
What are you doing?
Right.
And if he pulls out a camera, we're going to really have a conversation.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's not the parents' fault or the
No.
kids' fault that there are perverts out there who get into these
Oh,
pageants and want to watch kids.
no,
Okay.
that's correct.
And like you said, this was more of a Southern thing. I don't think people in the South would have bat an eye at this.
The other thing is, kids love what their parents love, or at least parents, you have to start somewhere, right? So my son, the fact that I'm a Michigan football fan, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm watching the games all the time. He's
Mm-hmm.
going to be interested in what I'm interested in, and I'm going to want to share that with him.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it was John Benet's idea or not, it's not a reach to think that because Patsy was involved in it, that John Benet ended up being interested in it, or at least tried it. That's every
Right.
parent,
Right.
and we know more about said pervert predators now than we did
Yes.
then,
Yes.
also. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't know. That's my whole thing there. And guys, seriously, how about start making parents create a list of people who are invited and screen the doors better?
Yes.
There you go. I just solved it.
Mm.
I solved the issue.
You know me. I'm always like, I'm for a grand solution. Like we give a gun to every woman in the country, boom. Mass
Yes.
shootings go away, lots of things go away. I'm not saying we should do that. I'm just saying,
Exactly. So, suspect list, y'all, this is a big list and I have way too much written down and I'm not going to go through all of it because it's a ton. But the first suspect that they had was Patsy. It wasn't even John yet.
mm-mm,
So it's Patsy Ramsey. And going back to the letter, they said that some of the letters in the ransom note
mm-hmm,
matched some of how Patsy wrote. So
mm,
like there was something with the C's or in certain letters.
okay,
They also had a story going about how John Benet wet her bed and sent Patsy into a quote unquote blind rage
mm,
where she hit John Benet in the head with something with something big and killed her. Like it killed her immediately. So then
mm,
she needed to cover up her story and staged this murder. Okay, we're going to break that down for 2 seconds.
absolutely.
That's insane.
That did not happen.
And it did not happen because, and this is where the cops, they like pissed me off so bad.
I know.
This is where they just royally effed it up because they they knew like shortly after they examined her body that she was alive while she was being tortured. So she couldn't have been
Yes.
blown in the head by something, died, and then tortured.
Well, no, and also I think when you think about the fact that there was a garrote involved,
Yes,
that
there's no
doesn't
way.
scream mother.
Not at all. And the fact that there were marks on her neck of her trying to get the garrote off.
Yeah, no, no,
Like idiots. I'm sorry. Just a
no,
bunch
that was
of
stupid. I agree with you.
freaking idiots. So,
Stupid.
but they ran with that story, dude, for a hot minute.
Well, I thought there was a chance that someone in the family killed her or she died accidentally. And
Sure.
rich families don't want to be in, they will sometimes do stupid things
Hmm.
because they don't want to look bad or have a big
Hmm.
whatever.
Hmm.
I did think for a long time that maybe this was staged until
Sure.
I understood more about the evidence that was
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Now I'm convinced it's not anyone in the family.
But that's the thing, though, is if you knew what the evidence was before, you would have never thought that.
If I knew she'd been tortured and
Yeah.
sexually, I knew there was some evidence that pointed to sexual assault, but if I
Mhm.
knew that she'd been tortured alive and sexually assaulted, I never would have suspected a family member.
Right. Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. Well, and again, I'm gonna like really nail this frickin' home that
Mm.
she was alive while she was being tortured. There was hemorrhaging in her eyes and her heart. That
Mm.
means she was alive.
She was alive. Yep.
Okay. Y'all, I get so heated with this stuff because,
I,
ugh, I'm so mad.
well, I mean, that's common sense. I'm
I
sorry.
know.
We
So,
read police reports every freaking day and try to
yes.
reconstruct scenes to try to determine what actually happened, what all the pieces
Hmm.
are. So
Hmm.
this hits home for us anyway, because
Yep.
our entire job surrounds interpreting a police report and then trying to build accountability on the part of the person that we're doing therapy with.
Yep.
So
Yep.
this stuff, I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire. And if you get an
Yep.
insane police report, which this would be an insane police report,
Yep.
as they're trying
Yep.
to build this case, it's so clear to me that they weren't going in a direction they wanted to go in, and they weren't
Yep.
letting the information come to them.
Nope.
Mm,
Yeah. So I just need our listeners to picture. a mom doing those things
Mm,
to her daughter while she's alive when there's no history of
mm-mm,
sexual abuse to any of them.
mm-mm,
And evidence would show that, and I say evidence like home videos would show that they loved each other, like they were not isolated, they were around,
mm.
people saw them, and yes, sketchy stuff does happen, but like, you know, no one was like, "Ooh, Patsy's a freaking weirdo," before all this happened.
Patsy's a weirdo. Patsy was not known as being a weirdo leading up to
Ex-
this.
exactly.
One thing I want to highlight, and this is probably jumping into your next section, but
Mhm.
this is around the time that the Boulder PD and the Boulder DA's office start to split.
Yes.
And I got to tell you something. That's not uncommon, first of all.
No.
But you just don't mess around with the DA's office,
Mhm.
especially in Boulder. You are in an affluent city with a university.
Mhm.
The Boulder DA's office is not playing. And
Mhm.
they realized these cops are nuts.
Mhm.
I think they knew quickly
Mhm.
that this was not great
No. Yes,
because
correct.
by March, they brought in a different detective to come in and take a look at stuff. The DA's office did.
No, I know.
Tells you everything you need to know about Boulder PD right there.
Literally. Yep. Yeah. I don't do a deep dive into that, so that's good info. So Patsy didn't do this.
Mm-mm.
Okay. The biggest thing that they hung on to literally was the ransom note and the like similarities in the handwriting. That
Yeah.
was like what the Boulder police were hanging their freaking hats
The
on.
whole case, yep, was
Yep.
hanging on that.
Also, they were never even questioned if her bedding was wet.
Cool, cool, cool. So you think this woman killed her daughter over a wet bed and you didn't even check if the bed was actually wet?
Correct.
Wow.
No, idiots. It's bad.
That's bad. I'm sorry. That's
Oh.
embarrassing.
So then Burke Ramsey, and I'm not going to go in depth with his because he was cleared real fast. Burke was 9 when all this happened. He was interviewed, and he said that his mom came in, flipped on the lights. Burke was brought to a friend's house that morning to get him out of the house, which makes sense. I'm not going
Make
to keep my 9-year-old in the house. And then in an interview, he said, I thought Jon Benet would be there when they came to get me. I thought they found her. I don't know if I was dreaming. And I started being really sad. And they
mm,
told me that Jon Benet was in heaven and I started crying.
mm,
This is like 9-year-old Burke. I know.
mm.
He became a suspect. This is like the weird part. He became a suspect in 2016, is like when people really were like, Burke did it. Yeah, and they did talk about, and I don't remember this in full detail, but they talked about one time Burke hit his sister with something and like left a scar,
Mm.
but that's like about as, intense as he got. In 2016, CBS aired a primetime special that accused Burke of killing his sister. The
Oh,
spec
I saw that one.
Yeah, the speculation was that he was pissed because she ate some of his snacks, which is that's the other thing, the pineapple that was in her system.
Yeah,
She had eaten pineapple right before she died, and then and that he killed her over her eating his snack at like in the middle of the night. The kid wasn't even awake.
on Christmas.
Yeah, like stupid.
Kids don't tend to
Um,
be in a murderous mood with all their new toys at Christmas.
no.
They're not in a murderous mood anyway.
And he wasn't even awake. Anyway,
No.
thankfully he sued them. I'm glad he did, and he did get some money.
Good for you, man.
I know. Sorry, Burke. John was also a suspect. One of the detectives said this was the thing that you said. Oh my gosh. What was her name? Linda?
Linda.
Listen, Linda, you had it all wrong. They had a nonverbal exchange and she said that he looked at him and made a look at her that she felt like was basically threatening her.
She was
Again,
like, I was looking into the eyes of a killer. I'm like, calm
he's,
down, Linda.
he's so aggressive.
Calm down, Linda. Linda should
Lin
not be in law enforcement.
Linda, listen. You know
Linda.
that video? Linda, listen.
Linda
Anyway,
needs some Xanax and a vacation, is what Linda needs.
for sure. She thought based on how he looked, he had an aggressive look. She
Okay.
literally said, I counted my bullets as I did not know if we would all be alive by time the other officers got there. Girlfriend, calm the frick down.
It's not like he's brandishing a weapon. You know
No.
what I mean? Or like there's a gun on the table. And she's like, oh my gosh, if he grabbed that gun, he might shoot.
Yes. They
Dude,
also said he wasn't acting right, casually looking through the mail. Like, oh my gosh. He was like, I was looking to see if there were any other letters that I needed to see.
Linda probably, number one, Linda, if you were doing your job, John wouldn't have felt like he needed to do your job that day. Okay, number one.
Right.
Number two, I think you should write novels instead of participate in law enforcement.
I
Just
agree
saying.
with you.
She's got a wild imagination.
She was a whole vibe.
Hmm.
After he was told to go look around with his friend, he went straight to the basement. I already talked about this
Hmm.
and found his daughter. That was made such a big deal by her. She was like, basically, why would he just go straight to the basement? He knew where her body was. I'm like,
Because there's only one floor left to search, you dummy. Sorry.
literally.
It just is upsetting because I feel,
Uh,
and I say this all the time, law enforcement is given so much
mhm,
authority and power, and some of them use that very well to protect us. They run into
mhm,
theaters when people are shooting, they put their life on the line.
mhm,
I'm very grateful for law enforcement. Sometimes they're just not doing well, and they're
mhm.
in a crucial job in a crucial moment and they just fail. And
Yeah.
that's what happened here.
Yes. There
Ugh.
was more reasons as to why they suspected the Ramseys. I'm not going to get into all that. What I will say is the Ramseys gave them everything, their DNA, credit card records, everything. And there was nothing
No.
that made them look like suspects besides
No.
the imagination of Boulder police.
Also, not for nothing, I know you're going to get a taser, but I just have to say it.
Yeah. They
If,
didn't know that.
how did they not
They
know?
didn't see that. They said it was the freaking
It's
train
from the train
track
tracks. But if you see marks on a
on a
child's knee,
body.
which by the way is where you tase someone. So is it easier to believe, Occam's razor, is it easier to believe that this child fell just right on the train tracks
Twice.
twice,
She has
right
two marks.
where people are typically tased? Well, no,
Well, she,
tasers are two marks.
I know, but there was
There were
two
two taser marks.
sets
See, that makes sense.
in her back and her neck.
Yes, that's where you tase people.
Yes,
It's just wild to me that we would go down the path of nope, she just fell on the train tracks in a weird way.
I know.
Ah,
I know. Okay, the intruder theory, which
yeah.
we both know the police had a hard time believing that an intruder was
They
there
had
because
already decided what they thought.
there were no quote unquote no footprints. There were pictures of the house that day. Janine, there was no snow in their backyard.
Oh, come on, I can't. I can't with this.
There was a dusting of snow in the front yard. There was nothing in the backyard.
You know how you and I always joke about this is how rumors get started.
Yeah.
When I'll say something and goof something up or you do or something and I always
Yeah.
joke that's how rumors get started. That's
Mhm.
literally what this was. One guy was like, and then there were the footprints and everybody was like, "Oh, the footprints." It's like there were no footprints. It's not a thing. It never somebody just made that up on their lunch break. That's not a
That's what they're
thing.
saying is there were none. And I'm like, no, duh. There was no snow. Why would there be footprints?
Absolutely.
Except there was a footprint, like a somewhat of a footprint on that freaking suitcase, which we'll get into. Or that we already got into. That shouldn't have been there.
Oh, but we can't talk about that because that would support a true intruder. We'd
In the
already decided
basement.
it was Patsy.
Oh my God, I
Oh, it's so
can't.
annoying. I can't with this.
I
Starting to get worked up, Nat. I'm starting to
know.
get worked up.
Same. Here we go. We're waking up, guys.
We are waking up.
Yeah, the DNA results came back and it wasn't the family and it was some other man. Oh my God.
No.
Surprise.
No other man. There's some other man's DNA. We've got a footprint on a suitcase that's conveniently under a window for getting out.
I
I
know.
can't with this.
I
Taser, all the things.
know. So bad.
Because one of the things they made a big deal about right after was
Mhm.
It must have been somebody in the family because there wasn't like a big struggle getting her to the basement. It's like this is a 6-year-old child. If she was tased, almost anybody could carry her to the basement without her making a peep.
Hmm.
Anyway, that makes me crazy.
Yeah. So also the Ramseys were not home, right, most of the evening. And so it would have been super easy for someone if they, especially if they knew kind of the house, to get into the basement and just chill until they got home and went to bed.
Yep.
And also, why would they go to the basement when they get home? That would make no sense,
Right.
you know? So then, oh my gosh, Janine, I can't with this. In
Hmm.
September of 1997, about 9 months after John Bonet's death, there was another incident in another nice neighborhood in Boulder that was really not far from the Ramsey home where another little girl was assaulted by an intruder.
Yes. There was one before and after John Benet's case.
Yeah, the one before well, you'll have to tell me about that one. It might be something I'm thinking of, but
Yeah.
the girl's father was away and the mom was home with her.
Mm.
The mom heard something late in the evening coming from her daughter's room, and she was able to catch the intruder. Well, she caught him about to assault her daughter, and then she chased him out of the house with like pepper spray. Sadly, they don't know who that was. And the police were like, it's not related. You idiots.
Well, it's so frustrating because I don't think this would have been nearly as hard to solve if they had
Hmm.
just had their brains open to a few other possibilities.
Hmm.
And I'm sorry, there's a reason. And this was true even in the 70s. So this isn't like this is new operationally. You talk to the sex offenders in the area first. That's the very first thing you do. And maybe they did. Maybe they did.
They
But if I
didn't.
had to guess, they didn't because they had already decided who did this back at the station before they even got
Yes.
to the house. They
Yes,
already
they
knew what
literally
happened.
said, they said the second John brought her daughter up from the basement, I knew the family did it.
Hmm.
Also, this little girl who was assaulted 9 months after John Benet or attempted to be assaulted upon, not her, whatever, you guys know what I mean. She went to the same dance studio as John Benet,
Okay, come on.
and it's not related. Like,
It was probably like a sex
yeah,
offender who was watching through the window at a certain time. Like
yeah,
a night stalker. Oh,
yeah.
I can't with this.
So the next suspect I have is this guy named Billy McReynolds, who's actually now dead. He recently died. And he was a friend of the family's who had dressed up as Santa Claus. Uh, it says the week before the John Benet's murder. I don't know if it was a week before or a year before.
Okay.
There was a few different things that were said, but he was at some point dressed as Santa at one of their parties.
Wow. Were they able to do a DNA comparison with him? I know they didn't have the same technology they have now, but they did have some.
Yeah, no, they did. So here's the thing. The DNA, all the people that they have suspects that they had as suspects, like there was no DNA match, which we'll get into some of the ones who like actually admitted to it.
Okay.
Um,
So he was just accused. Like he was one of the people on the
he
list
was
to
just,
check off.
yeah, basically. But there was a few reasons why. So it was rumored that he may have paid a little too much attention to John Bonet, going as far as to arrange a secret visit from Santa Claus on Christmas. Supposedly, he had chosen John Bonet to be his quote unquote special friend. Like he just really took a liking to her.
Which has
Also,
a little bit of a weird vibe to it, for
yeah.
sure.
Well, also he wrote her this letter saying, so it actually might have been a week before. He wrote her a letter saying something really special is going to happen the night of Christmas for her.
Okay, where is this man?
He's dead now.
Okay, now you want to talk about a suspect?
No, yeah, no, dude.
That's a
Yeah,
fucking suspect right there.
I
We got
know.
a note, special friend. We are checking off the predator list right along
Yep.
with this dude.
Yep.
How
Um,
how did I never hear about this person?
it's in the thing. It's in the 3 episode.
But I'm talking the media. How is the
Well,
media
there was
like?
speculation in the media, but it was really hush hush for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah, because it contradicted what the police wanted to be true.
Yeah. So here's the other weird thing. He had a daughter, had, I don't know. Yeah. And on December 26th in 1974, so 22 years before John Benet's murder, she was reported kidnapped, his daughter.
What ended up happening to his daughter?
So she was taken to some unknown location. She was forced to watch her friend be sexually assaulted. So there was two kids who were kidnapped. Both children were released.
That human is highly suspicious.
Hmm.
Was he ruled out with DNA though?
Yeah. And then
Oh,
2 years later, Jeanette McReynolds, so I think that's his wife,
okay.
wrote a book that became a play in which a girl is sexually assaulted and tortured in a basement, and the victim in the story later dies in the hospital.
Okay, this couple?
No, super weird.
Oh my gosh. You know what? Just put him somewhere anyway.
Hmm.
That's terrible.
And his daughter was about 10 when she was kidnapped with that other girl.
Now, it could be, okay, if we were to make a generous assumption, which I don't like to do where murder's concerned, it could be that because his daughter went through that, he had a special affinity
Hmm.
for little girls. However, the letter's weird. People, if somebody gives your child a letter and it is a grown up, you have a problem.
Yes.
You just do.
I told you about the time, and I won't go into like super specific detail, but I volunteer at the Celebrate Recovery teen version. It's called
Yes.
The Landing.
Yes.
And the teens have a section where we sit at the very beginning and then we move to the other building.
Right.
And it's put like adults are not supposed to sit back there except for the leaders. Okay.
Right. Right.
Well,
Right. Which is good.
people sit back there anyway, which is highly annoying, but
Mhm.
whatever. So I keep an eye out. And there was this older man who was sitting kind of next to us and like was just like saying random stuff, not like creepy or anything, but random
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah.
Like said something like, I like to sit back here with the teens because it makes me feel young again. Like kind of weird shit, you know?
Okay. Yeah. 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 I don't love it.
And so I'm sitting there and I'm sitting between him and like some of the teen girls, and then there's some of the teen boys behind me.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy might be like innocent as heck. Like he might literally just be like an old grandpa guy.
Yeah.
Um, but then he turns, they were talking about this was a while ago, so they were talking about like the summer like camp for the teens. And he overheard some of the boys saying like, "Oh, I can't go this summer," or whatever. So he turns around, he's like, "Well, why can't you go?" And the kid was like, "Well, we just can't like afford it," or something like that. I can't remember what the kid said. And the guy was like, "Well, let me give you my number, or let me get your number,
Mm.
and I can help you pay for it." And I literally jumped out of my seat. And I was like, absolutely not. There is a process. You can contact the church to donate to kids
Yes.
going
No,
to
you
this,
gotta
but
blow that up.
you do not need to get anybody's phone number. I like blew it up,
You
and
have to.
I'm sorry. I'm like, if they want to ask me to not be a leader after that, then that's fine. They didn't. They were like, "Thank you. That's great."
Oh, of
Because,
course.
whatever.
Yeah, we don't mess around with that kind of
No.
stuff.
So spot on to what Janine said, y'all. If anyone is
Mm-mm.
talking to your kid and you don't know who
Mm-mm.
they are, um,
Mm-mm.
and they're or you do and they write,
Even if you know
yes,
somebody takes a quote unquote special interest in your kid, you
you, yep.
you look at
Well,
them sideways and you check it out.
yes. Oh my goodness, I cannot.
Yep.
So anyway, he was ruled out because of evidence. I'm pretty sure his alibi was like his wife was with him.
Yeah, but
So
she's weird as heck. That's not good enough. I need to know that DNA ruled him out.
DNA ruled him out.
Okay, thank goodness. She's weird. She's weird too.
Uh,
I didn't know
no,
about
I
him.
know, dude.
He
So
is
another
highly upsetting.
So moving on to another suspect. I'm not gonna spend a ton of time on this guy, but his name was Gary Olivia. He lived in Oregon and he got caught for sexually assaulting a neighbor girl. Went on the run and ended up being in Boulder. And he was like a quote unquote transient, so like homeless guy
Okay.
basically.
Kind of tent living.
Yeah, tent living. One of his friends said that Gary had called him and seemed upset, and he had said that he had just heard a little girl. At the result of this, obviously the police took a look at him. When police found him in his tent, he had pictures of Jon Benet, like hanging up in his tent.
Ew.
I know.
He's probably, unfortunately, not the only transient or human, though, that's fixated on her over the years.
No, that's true. And that comes out.
Yeah.
He denied ever hurting her, but then, God, this was so weird. He said,
Mm.
I believe she came to me after she was killed and revealed herself to me. Ugh.
Oh, nasty. We're not doing that. We're just not doing that.
He later confessed and said that he would take credit for her murder if he had 3 meals a day and a roof over his head by going to prison.
Okay.
His DNA did not match.
Nope.
The pageant mothers talked about a photographer named Randy Simmons, who was super weird. He sold some of Jon Benet's photos to an agency and that's how some of her photos got leaked to the tabloids. He had super weird photos in his studio, like borderline inappropriate, quote unquote, borderline inappropriate. Um, Not like porn, but photos of girls like without their tops on. Just weird. Yeah. And he was one of the photographers at the pageants.
He's like the pioneer of child pornography.
Oh no, literally. Well,
You know what I mean? Like,
he was arrested later in life for that.
oh,
So
of course. Yeah. I mean, this is not hard to figure out. Boop,
yeah.
straight line. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's weird is some mothers got a call from him after Jon Benet died, and he literally was just calling them to say he did not kill Jon Benet. No one was saying.
Now, does protest too much. Hey, haven't seen you in a couple years. I did not kill John Benet Ramsey. It's like
No, well, it was like right after he was calling some of the moms and being like, I didn't kill her. Like kind of this like freak
defensive.
out. Yeah.
Okay.
And that was the thing. Like people were like, no one's saying you did, bro.
No.
You know?
Mm-mm.
A year later, he was walking down the street naked when police approached him, and he literally automatically goes, I didn't kill Jon Benet.
He's walking down the street naked and he goes, I didn't kill John Benet.
Yeah.
He had bigger fish to fry. Did he go to jail? I'm assuming.
Later, not for that. I mean, I'm sure for that, but
Indecent exposure.
yeah, I'm sure he went to jail for that, but
Yeah.
it wasn't specific that he was charged.
Okay.
What was specific is that he was later arrested in a different state for downloading child pornography in a restaurant using their public Wi-Fi.
Nobody said he was a smart man.
No, idiot.
I know, I'm sorry.
His DNA was not found at the crime scene.
Mm-hmm.
They got a call from a guy in North Carolina. Got called about a guy in North Carolina named John Eustace. Eustace.
Mm-hmm.
He was also a drifter who had kidnapped and killed a 2-year-old. When they went to his home, there was a shrine of Jon Benet, but unfortunately, he had an alibi for that night and no evidence, no
Okay.
DNA. So here's the weird one, and then we're gonna jump to some other stuff here. This one's big. I'll try not to go into too much detail because you guys can go watch the Netflix series. But one of the detectives, Michael, got contacted by an individual via email who went by Daxis, Daxis.
Mm-hmm.
And basically this guy was saying that he was in a love affair with Jon Benet, that he was the one who did it, and that he was quote unquote a lover of little girls.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, 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 cool.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't he the one who said I was, nope, different guy.
Hmm.
Something on the next guy.
He was giving all of the information that was already in the media, but he did have some information that was not in the media and had never been said.
Yep.
So he said, ask John what Jon Benet's nickname was for Nedra, which is her grandmother. And it
Yeah.
was Nettie. And he was the only one who knew that.
Mm.
Hmm. He wanted to get in contact with Patsy, but that ended up not happening. He basically wanted to apologize or get her forgiveness. He's a weird dude. He called the garrote a special necklace. He said, I hate using the word asphyxiation. He was just super weird.
He's weird.
I don't even want to talk about what he said because he goes into specifics that are just wildly, wildly uncomfortable.
Yep.
He somehow, he got charged earlier in his life for sexual assault, sex abuse, I think kid pornography. He
Hmm.
went on the run and then was able somehow to get teaching jobs in other countries.
Mm.
He was arrested in Thailand, was brought to Boulder, but as similar to the other ones, his evidence was not at the crime scene.
Was John Mark Carr was arrested in Thailand?
Daxis is John Mark Carr.
Oh, that's right. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
He's
Sorry, I
the
did
one who
not make that.
basically kicked this whole thing off with, I was with Jon Benet when she died.
Yes, and saying that it was an accident for killing her.
Ugh. Well, and
Um,
they were interested enough to extradite him to Boulder, which they wouldn't do unless they really felt like he was involved. But
well,
then the DNA didn't match.
that's because of how he told the story.
Oh
So
yeah, the story's creepy AF. Yeah.
the story's super creepy, but it lines up with what happened,
Hmm.
like
Stuff he shouldn't
directly.
know. Well,
Yes.
and then I read a thing that basically all the DNA evidence is under scrutiny because it may be ruling people out for the wrong reasons. So they need to go beyond
Mhm.
DNA and they need to
Yep.
get into like trace DNA and all of this
Yep.
stuff.
Yep.
But you know,
Yep.
Polis is going to reopen the case. Polis is my dude. You know this. Polis,
Oh,
if you hear this, please
reopen the case.
reopen the case because, well, okay, you may get into this, but in 2023, the CBI panel
Yeah.
was set to review the case, and we don't
Yeah.
really have any updates about
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
this is what it's going to take is the FBI or the
Yeah.
CBI getting involved
Yeah.
and looking at various kinds of
Yeah.
DNA and getting into traces and all the things. They just need
Yes.
to get involved in all of it.
Yes. Yeah. I do have that, but we don't have to revisit it because that's literally it.
Bam!
Um,
The same brain.
I know. So, like you said earlier, they brought Lou Smith in. He was the detective that the DA brought in.
He's a homie. I mean, I
Oh,
we would
he's a
like him
big homie.
so much. Like
Big homie.
he's the kind of person that if something happened to me, I would want somebody like this on the case who's going to make it
Yes.
their life mission to figure out what happened to me.
Yes. Yep.
You know?
So they brought him in because they were obviously struggling,
Yeah.
and not getting any leads, nothing. And they were trying to they kept, and we're gonna get into this, they kept trying to pin it on the Ramseys. He was the one who realized and who found the fact that there was a taser used.
Oh my God.
Weird.
Weird.
So the taser was used on her body. He also focused on the window. So one of the things that the police kept saying was the window's too small. That man, Lou Smith,
Yeah.
doesn't look small. He's skinny, but he is a tall man, and he got in and out of that window just fine.
Like lickety split. Like it took him like 2 seconds.
2 seconds.
Mm.
So he was proving that it would have been very easy to get in and out of that window.
Oh yeah.
And he also, helped them realize that this was a taser and not a freaking train track. Also, the train track had three,
I
uh,
know. The train track
not
didn't even
two.
make sense.
No, it made zero sense.
Mm.
They just did not, they really, really messed this whole thing up. So then they get into the grand jury. Okay. The police department hires Michael Caine, which is interesting. I know a Michael Caine, but anyway,
Mm.
not the same guy.
Mm-mm.
To
I do
follow up,
too. Not the
I
same
know
guy.
you do, yeah. We know the same Michael Caine. To follow up on why the Ramseys were suspects, he was a grand jury specialist to advise whether a secret panel should investigate the case. The case did go to the grand jury with the evidence that they had. And long story short, y'all, it was a waste of time, money, and resources.
Yeah, that's our tax dollars at work.
Yes. So the grand jury came back and said there's not enough evidence to basically arrest the Ramsey parents
Charge anybody that they'd already investigated.
and charge anybody. What they did say was that they were indicted. They said this later that the Ramseys were indicted for child abuse,
Mm.
allowing her to be placed. I don't agree with this at all. Child abuse, allowing her to be placed in situations which resulted in her death. I don't agree with that.
No. No.
Because they're saying the pageants are how they subjected
So
her
they
to.
were indicted, but it didn't all hold up.
It didn't, no.
Yeah.
But they were indicted for child abuse, not even for murder.
Yeah. And even that
Um,
didn't hold up. Yeah.
mm-mm. Yeah, there's no probable cause. So here we are, y'all. That's like the information. Janine gave the 2023 update. Lou did die, but wanted his legacy to live on, so he passed the work to his adult children and they continued to investigate this.
And if the CBI gets involved, they will likely meet
Mhm.
with them.
Mhm.
Like they'll take all that information and Lou's work won't be in vain.
Yeah. Well, and I just realized I do have the name of that dummy detective, Steve Thomas.
Oh, Steve.
Um, yeah, he was the one. We don't like Steve's very much.
No, we've had a couple bad ones.
Yeah. So Steve Thomas wrote the bestseller, basically accusing Patsy of killing their daughter. Thankfully, he and his publisher were sued by the Ramseys, and the Ramseys got some money.
Good.
Um, but yeah, he was the one that was like literally doing all this while the case was still open.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we were going to talk about some distortions that were going
Yes.
on in this situation. So why do you think, Nat, people run with bad ideas and won't walk them back? Even when they're faced with evidence that is clearly contrary to what they think or initially thought.
Well, first of all, benefit of the doubt says they really want to figure this out.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the generous assumption. Maybe we make a
Yes.
generous assumption that they want to get the answer.
Yes. And then they go so far, and this is one of the things that our producer gave us. They run so far, it becomes a sunk cost fallacy.
Tell them what that means.
So, the sunk cost fallacy is the phenomenon whereby a person is reluctant to abandon a strategy or course of action because they've invested heavily in it, even when it is clear that abandonment would be more beneficial. So, for the Boulder police, there was such little, not even little evidence. There was a plenty of evidence, but they didn't have anyone to match it.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, they hung their hat on a ransom note
Mm-hmm.
and a pageant situation and hung their hat on the Ramseys
And just
and,
ran with it.
and just ran with it. And even when evidence, literal evidence, like the
Mhm.
Ramseys handed over their DNA, their credit card, like their
Everything.
statements, everything, they still were just like, we cannot be wrong in this. And I
Mm-mm.
think at some point there becomes this level of like embarrassment if they admit
Yes.
that they're wrong.
Well, there's a significant amount of ego
Yes.
in that. And the confirmation bias part is like it's almost like you're wearing a pair of glasses
Yep.
and all you can see are things that line up with what your theory is. And
Yep.
so when you think about law enforcement, you think about how they are trained and they have to be trained to
Hmm.
just do a certain thing when a certain situation arises. Like they just have to be able to make split second decisions. And I'm so thankful that they are trained and can do that because
Yep.
I don't know that I would be able to do that.
No.
But the thing that's weird is if you take people and you teach them to respond to split second scenarios when their heart's beating fast and everything's going 100 miles an hour, the
Hmm.
opposite skill set is using your prefrontal cortex to think really critically about a problem.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so the first folks on the scene are not always the one who are doing the most critical thinking. That's why detectives
Yep.
go through a different kind of training.
Yep.
So the problem here is some of the first people that responded, I don't think had the skill set
Nope.
to gather what they needed to gather to be able to actually see this thing all the way through,
Yep. Correct.
you know?
Yes. And that was the thing is like they just could not see beyond their own what they wanted to see in their own perspective.
Mm.
Like there was no room for them to do
And then
that.
it became a club, and it's almost like they were
Mhm.
all aligned on this thing. And if you step out, that's a problem. So when I had my surgery, this woman told me, she came in to like check me in or whatever. And she goes, when they come in to take you for surgery, they're going to ask you these four questions in this order. If
Mhm.
any of them don't, you tell them to come get me and we're doing it again. So the reason there's this rigid testing and so many people check in with you in a medical situation is because it's really common in any discipline for
Mhm.
everybody to fall in line with one thought process. And so in the medical field, they've put all these systems in place, like checklists and all of that, to try to keep people safe. Law enforcement, I'm sure, has the same thing. I don't know what that looks like, but
Mhm.
whatever that was clearly failed here. And then they circled ranks
Yep.
instead of just taking a breath and going, oh no, I don't think we did this right. We need to
We
take a
got
step
this
back.
wrong.
Yeah, we got this wrong. They just kind of played it forward and it's super unfortunate.
Super unfortunate and really painful.
Yes.
Really painful for the family, really painful for her, her brother that is a couple years older than her, and then also like their other, John's other kids. But for parents to be accused of the heinous stuff that happened
Mm.
is really terrible.
One of my questions was for you. What do you think Boulder PD owes the Ramseys?
I don't
Because
know,
if we open this case back up, what do they owe them? They've won, you like we've
dude.
alluded to, Burke got some money. They got some money when they were,
Yeah.
wrongfully accused, blah blah
I
blah.
mean,
But
here's the thing though. There's no amount of
exactly.
money or of life that could be given back to them.
Mm.
I mean, they would just have to, like, as silly as it sounds, they would just have to own it and be like, we are so sorry that screwed this up so bad.
They need to own it publicly. They need
Yes.
to clear them even more than they already have.
Yes.
I think, like you said, public apology. And quite frankly, they need to change their procedures even now because they
Yeah.
still haven't found it. So if all of a sudden CBI gets involved and they solve this case, Boulder has some explaining to do
Yeah.
because Boulder could have tagged the CBI in at any point to solve this case. I
Yeah.
don't think they want to.
Well, that's the problem is you see this sometimes show up where there's this like competition between police force and FBI or police force and CBI. Right. And it's like they want to be able to like figure this out. And I get it. Like you want to be able to figure it out within your own county, but you need reinforcement. And so the fact that it like took the turn that it did, that the police and the DA,
Mm-hmm.
right? The district attorneys, the reason why I got so sideways and there was like two sides
Yeah.
is because I think the police just did not want to hear feedback,
Oh, I agree totally.
you know?
And one of the things that I think is really freeing in life, if you can just embrace it, is we don't know what we don't know. The more I know about the field of psychology, the more I know I don't know. The
Yes.
more I learn about DV, the more complex it looks, and the more there's all these different pieces to it.
Mhm.
It's not a weakness to
Mm-mm.
admit that you don't know everything. It's actually a tremendous strength.
Yeah, it is. I respect more people who come in and say, you know what, I don't know. Let me figure that
Mm.
out.
Well,
Than
and this
people who
is
try to
why
make it.
we had two parts to the CEO murder, because
Yeah,
if I'm going to have critical thinking and I'm going to have a really strong opinion about something,
yeah.
I need to get all of the information. I may still have my strong opinion at the end of the day.
I still have my strong opinion about the CEO murder.
I do too. I've got a pretty strong lens and an opinion, but I don't want to have that opinion unless I've vetted the information. And now I feel like
Yeah.
I've vetted some of the information. I'm thankful that we did that.
Yeah.
This is true on a grand scale here. And the
Yes.
problem is because they didn't do it, they've inflicted a lifetime of pain
Yeah.
on this family.
Lifetime. Lifetime.
Mm.
Yeah, I just felt so, and Patsy died, obviously pretty young. She was 49. And I just feel for her because I mean, they went at her at the very beginning, and
Oh,
there was
yeah.
an interview that she did, and she was super drugged up. Like, I mean, some sort of sedative. But here's the thing,
Like
I
any
would
mom
be
would
too.
be. Oh my
Oh,
gosh, I'd be like, send me to
1000%.
the moon, sir. I want to feel nothing for 6 months.
Literally, literally, if not longer. So
Yep.
people were giving her all this crap, and I'm like, I would be screwed up. I'm
Oh,
avoiding my F word, y'all. I would be messed up on medication
absolutely.
if I were her.
Well, and when
So,
I think about even that, even the thing that happened with the river,
mhm.
you really weren't ready to talk for a couple weeks.
No, I
Truly.
didn't want to talk about it.
You were sick, you were
Mhm.
exhausted, you were in bed, and it was so traumatic and it was hard to talk about. And all
Yes.
everyone wants to do is talk about it.
Hmm.
You
I
know?
literally had to tell you to tell people so I didn't
Yes.
get asked.
Well, I didn't ask you for weeks. I didn't ask you until I came to your house and then I was like, you want to tell me anything about it? You don't have to. Because I
Yeah.
know this. I know these things. And
Yes.
it's not that anybody did anything wrong asking. It's just your
No.
brain is not connected to
No.
your body for a while on purpose
Right.
to
Well,
protect you.
and here's the thing too. Yes, absolutely. And when people say like people's stories change and whatever, whatever, and traumatic events, I'm still, from
Oh
that
yeah.
experience, I'm still putting pieces together. It's taken up until basically like when we shared it on the podcast for me to
Yep.
be like, oh, I remember that part a little bit.
Yes.
I vaguely remember that part, but in my brain, there was a totally different story,
Yep.
right? And so you think of the Benet or the Benets, the Ramsey family,
Yeah.
and you think of them trying to talk about, what was going on for them and
Mm.
the what happened that night and, and here's the thing, their story didn't change.
Mm-mm. No,
It
it didn't
didn't
change
change.
ever. Mm-mm.
And that's traumatic. Everything they went through was so traumatic.
Here's the $1 million question.
Okay.
Who do you think murdered John Benet Ramsey?
Mm. Someone that I think it could have been someone that the family knows.
I think it's either somebody the family knows, I agree, or I think it was the dude
Hmm.
that broke into the window,
Of
not
the other girl.
of the other girl.
Yeah. I
Same
agree with that.
signature, sex
Yep.
offender.
Yep.
It's too close to
I
the same
agree with
thing.
that. Yep.
And what we know too about people operating in this arena,
Hmm.
they have a geographical area typically. They don't bounce all over the place. And so the
Hmm.
fact that that happened,
And he didn't get caught for either one.
no, and they were in the same dance class.
Yep.
You got to ask yourself so many questions there. And
Yep.
so,
Well, and here's the other thing, the photographer that I talked
mhm,
about,
mhm,
he said, I forget to who, I think it was one of the detectives. He said he knows more about the case than he knew more about the case, but that he wasn't going to share it.
mm,
So there's people out there who have information and they just won't
yeah,
tell it, you know.
yep,
I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. If you know what, you're probably old as shit. So at the end of the day, um go out famous, I guess, share
yeah.
what you did. Tell us.
I mean, don't you want to get it off your chest?
Yes.
Get it off your chest before you die, you know? Get it off your chest. I don't know that we will ever know because
I
if
know
it
that's the
was
sad
that
part.
other person who broke into that other girl's window, I don't know that we'll ever know. However,
Hmm.
the DNA database is ginormous. Nat and I are in the database. If we do anything crazy, they're going to know it's us in 5 seconds. So
Yep.
that is a massive database and it covers millions of people. So
Hmm.
ah, and then on top of that, then you have the ancestry.com type stuff where they can, if your
Yes.
second cousin did a genogram type thing in ancestry, they can maybe trace it back to you. So
Yeah.
I still think if we get the CBI involved, I think we may catch him.
Yep.
And
Well,
it sounds like the CBI is involved. We just don't know anything yet.
yeah.
I
Yep.
feel very certain that the Boulder PD is not going to solve it.
No. No.
That trip, or wait, that train has left the station. Like it is
Yes.
over. It is not going to
Yes.
get solved by Boulder PD.
Yep.
Well, y'all, thanks for joining us. Nat, you did an awesome job summing it up.
Thanks.
And why don't you let us know? Go on Instagram and let us know who you think killed John Benet Ramsey.
Yes. And here's the thing though, don't say Burke.
Don't say Burke. I don't think it's Burke. Well, they cleared him. They cleared him via DNA, and he was a 9-year-old child. So,
Yeah. You guys, he could not have made that garrote. He couldn't have done,
mm-mm.
was done.
So yeah, don't say Burke. But we would love to hear other folks outside of the family that you think might have killed
Yes.
John Benet Ramsey.
Yep.
And there's tip lines and everything. So if you know something, if you just happen to be somebody who knows something, call the tip line, that we still want to solve the case.
Yes, we want to know. This is such a big case and it just like pulls on my heartstrings, you know. She was so little and
I know.
we want it solved
We want it solved. And
in this lifetime.
we have a couple other Christmas time cases coming up as well that are tough ones. But thanks for joining us. We have more stuff coming for you this month. And as always,
Bye, forensic friends.
I'm Janine.
And I'm Nat.
And as always, thanks for listening and join us next week for more crime, psychology, and heart.